What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. The Assassin's rework is pretty much confirmed by this point and is set to come out during what I would expect would be the next preseason update or maybe a little bit before it. And in that Assassin class update, one of the more notable characters that is going to receive some changes almost certainly is definitely AKALI. She's been in a rough spot for a while now and certainly is more deserving of changes than most of the other champions being looked at, and as well, there is quite a lot of bits and pieces of information that writers have mentioned in the past that actually tell us a lot about what we can expect during the future AKALI rework, and what you might be able to expect will just happen to AKALI. And most of all, AKALI's rework is just shaping up to be totally awesome. And if you guys enjoy the video, hit that like button, and if you don't enjoy the video, definitely hit that dislike, and if this video gets 5,000 ratings, I'm gonna do 100 push-ups. So let's start off this conversation with what we know for sure, which is all of the writer comments from the past about this super exciting AKALI rework. So with the general Assassin rework, Riot is trying to accomplish 3 specific things within each individual champion. Number 1 is of course to make each assassin have healthy gameplay, and this is something that AKALI kind of struggles with quite a lot. And number 2 is to make each assassin bring something unique to the table to make them worth picking over other assassins. Again, this is something AKALI struggles with quite a lot and is probably the worst thing about her design at the moment. And number 3 is to make assassins meaningfully contribute to winning the game, which AKALI does kind of okay but can struggle with a bit since her split pushing power isn't necessarily exceptional, and neither is her utility either. Anyway, Riot Meddler said that the AKALI rework would be focused on making her more distinct from other assassins primarily, and giving her healthier gameplay for the most part, which does make a lot of sense. I mean, she struggles a lot with just being straight up outclassed by champions like Diana, who just do her job way better, as well as having some weird mechanics that create for some very weird, oftentimes unhealthy counterplay interactions. Riot Meddler also said that AKALI's W was a really unique ability, but the rest of her kit was not, and there's a lot of cool stuff that can be done, and that it would make a lot more sense to bundle the AKALI rework changes with the rest of the Assassin class as a whole. However, recently Riot Reeve 3 described AKALI as someone who needs much more work than they could do in a roster scope project, but then he went on and said that she would still be a good candidate for some smaller scope work though, so it's actually possible that AKALI might receive 2 reworks. But based off of what Riot Meddler said previously, I wouldn't be surprised if AKALI is just instead going to end up being the biggest Assassin rework during the overall Assassin update in terms of receiving the most changes. Riot Scruffy also described AKALI as being in the top 2 of Assassin champions who could just be so much cooler with a rework, the other one being Talon, and stated that AKALI's kit was not nearly as cool or as deep as it could be. He also would go on to share a ton of Riot's plans for AKALI, and they really explain a lot about what you can expect to see in the upcoming AKALI rework. First off, the AKALI rework is going to create a much more clear path for success in terms of gameplay other than just getting fed, to the point where AKALI will be a lot more impactful when she's behind, but also have a lot more counterplay when she's ahead. He also said that the AKALI rework was going to have an overhaul and maybe an upgrade to her W Shroud in a way that would remove the hard counterplay issue with pink wards and stealth revealing mechanics in favor of some new form of counterplay that is maybe a little bit more accessible. And as well, her improved W Shroud is also likely going to have some interactions with her teammates as well. And Riot Scruffy also described the future AKALI rework to be somewhat similar to the scope of Fiora, in that they really want to play up her theme a lot more and really just ramp up that super coolness factor, especially since AKALI has a lot of spells that just straight up have room for improvement, and will be redone in favor of much more flexible and more importantly fun gameplay patterns with the goal of preserving and enhancing the AKALI playstyle. So although she'll likely receive some mechanics changes, her playstyle will almost certainly remain the same. She's still going to have dashes, she's still going to have burst damage, and she's still going to have the gameplay of juking in and out of a shroud, and she will still have dual scaling effects. Riot Scruffy also said that the AKALI rework in short would be an overall buff, almost for sure, but would also introduce some elements that are much more fair to opponents. And he ended his post with a big shout out to those of you who are AKALI mains out there, essentially saying that if you are an AKALI main, there's nothing to worry about, as the overall changes they're making is being targeted specifically towards AKALI mains, rather than just being a generic design reboot for everyone. So if you're an AKALI main, I would definitely be optimistic about this rework. And that's just about everything Riot Scruffy said, as well as what we know about the rework. So what does that tell us? Well, in a previous video, I briefly mentioned AKALI's E in the sense that it was an ability that just has so much room for improvement. So I would definitely expect her E to probably become a completely new ability, just because there's so much more cool stuff that you could do with it. Either that, or it's just going to gain a bunch of new interactions that affect the rest of her abilities, kind of similar to how maybe Ryze's E gained a bunch of interactions in his rework. As well, her W is almost certainly going to have the counterplay of just slapping down a pink ward or using a red trinket removed in favor of something else entirely. Whether this means she no longer has stealth on the ability, I can't say for sure. I mean, she might still have stealth, but the riders like this ability a lot since it is really unique, honestly, so she'll definitely still keep it in some form, but it will interact in a way that has counterplay based on decision making probably, rather than just using an item to be both more fun for AKALI players and less pub stompy, in the sense that it's really powerful versus lower ranked players since they don't know what items to get, or maybe they just don't get them, and completely useless versus higher ranked players on the flip side because they always get the right items. AKALI right now kind of plays like she almost just doesn't have this ability in her kit at all sometimes in higher rankings, since those types of players are just good enough to literally always have some type of pink ward or stealth reveal or something. And that aspect really locks her out from being competitively viable, and it also makes her super frustrating versus newer players too, who have no idea what to do or what items to get or how to play against it. So what I would say will probably happen is that the stealth might just get removed in favor of maybe giving some extreme tank stats or defensive power in the Shroud, or maybe the stealth will change to something that is more interactive, but not counterable by items or effects. Her ultimate will probably remain roughly the same because her unique power of being the assassin that is the best at killing super hyper mobile champions is something that's kind of core to her gameplay fantasy, but I would expect her ultimate to maybe gain some additional interactions with her other abilities or something. Maybe she gets some bonus movement speed now if her opponent has a mark on them or something, but overall she's definitely going to keep having dashes for sure, and I really doubt that they'll put dashes on an ability other than her ultimate since that could potentially conflict with their playstyle. One thing that they almost certainly won't do, but I could actually see as something that could be really fun and interesting, is to actually give AKALI access to her ultimate at level 1. But then maybe toning down the ultimate a lot in terms of damage and cooldown. And this could honestly make her so much more fun, but again, probably isn't going to happen because it would remove a really important weakness that she has right now and probably would just make her way too overpowered. Her Q is also a very core ability as well, so it almost certainly is going to get no changes at all, or not that many changes, but I would definitely expect to see Mark of the Assassin gain a bunch of additional interactions in her kit, and I would say that's probably the mechanic they'll be designing her kit around, or at least that's the one that makes the most sense. I mean, they said they're focusing a lot on appealing to AKALI mains already, so keeping that in mind, it would make a lot more sense to just build upon her already existing mechanics and ideas rather than introducing completely new ones. So I would expect her mark to maybe be the majority of her gameplay now. It's not impossible that they make her Q a skill shot, but taking away AKALI's reliability is a very anti-fun thing to do, so it's probably not going to happen, and they are focusing a lot on just making AKALI super fun to play. But overall, the AKALI rework is looking pretty damn awesome, and it's definitely something I'm super excited for because AKALI actually used to be one of my favorite champions in the entire game until she got nerfed pretty hard and especially had her EQ mechanic removed on patch 5.2. But what do you guys think about AKALI, and what do you guys think about the AKALI rework? Anyway, looks like that's gonna be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, consider subscribing if you haven't already, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.